From WFRV TV Local 5, your local election headquarters, this is Newsmaker Sunday with your host, Tom Zaleski.
Good morning. Welcome to Newsmaker Sunday. I'm Tom Zaleski. Today, we focus on the 6th Congressional District race, an area which covers just north of Milwaukee, reaching into areas just west of Oshkosh and the Fox Cities. Two candidates competing for that seat, Republican incumbent Glenn Grothman of Greenbush and Democrat Jessica King of Oshkosh. And today, we focus on Jessica King. She has a law degree from Thomas Jefferson Law School and served as an adjunct professor at UW-Oshkosh. She is a former member of the Oshkosh Common Council and a former member of the Wisconsin State Senate, representing District 18, 2011 through 2013. And we have the pleasure of welcoming Jessica King to Newsmaker Sunday. Thanks so much for being here this morning.
Well, thank you for having me.
Before we get into the hits, runs, and errors of hardcore politics, what has it been like for you campaigning in this COVID world of ours?
Well, when I started campaigning 13 months ago, I would have never expected this pandemic. And so it's definitely changed the strategy and our consciousness of how to connect with people. We're doing a lot more telephone connecting and text banking and trying to keep people safe with physical distancing. So it's more of literature drops and all those traditional handshaking and baby kissing, you know, that kind of stuff isn't happening as much. But, you know, we still are trying to reach out and do a lot of Zoom meetings. I definitely have been to a lot of Zoom community meetings where I get an opportunity to talk to people in the counties, because the district is quite large. So that's what we've been relying on, and now with a few days left to go, you know, we'll see if it's a winning strategy.
How do you see the federal response to COVID-19 so far? Is there more that Congress can do?
I actually believe there is quite a bit more. I'm very disappointed that they have not, the Congress has not passed an additional relief bill. It's definitely needed. I have been a big supporter of the SMART bill, because the SMART Act, because it is a compromise bipartisan bill. It would support state and municipal governments, and right now they desperately need that support. We definitely need to look at getting more PPE, and then in addition, I think the federal government should do more to get rapid testing, so that way we could actually test asymptomatic carriers. I really think that's what's been missing in our federal strategy, is we continue to wait for people to get symptoms before they get tested. And I think we all understand at this point that the strategy to defeat COVID as a nation is really to find the asymptomatic carriers. And the only way you can really do that is with these rapid tests. And right now they're available maybe to NBA players and Secret Services agents, and I really think they need to be mass produced. And I think the federal government, the president, could have used the Defense Production Act, that in the same way that they used it to manufacture ventilators. I really think they should have used that for rapid tests that don't require clinical processing. You don't have to wait 4 days to get it from a lab. It's something that could provide you results 15 minutes on premises. And that kind of testing could be made available for our school districts or for our very large employers. I can think of, some of these production and manufacturing facilities that they'd love to have the knowledge of which one of their employees was an asymptomatic carrier, and then they do the right thing, and send that person home and hopefully compensate them to keep the rest of the shift running smoothly. And that's what we really need to open up our economy safely and to make sure everyone is protected and safe.
As you well know, businesses have been getting hit hard by this coronavirus. They're being told 1 week to close, 1 week 25%, 1 week back open full. What's the balance here? How can we keep these businesses open while still keeping everyone safe?
Well, I think we have to have a community-based strategy that focuses on public health. I think if we all decide that we can, whether it's wear a mask and see that as a patriotic opportunity, or really limit our contact with, to essential activities or essential people, I think we can work together to solve this. And I think, right now, one of the reasons that maybe people aren't participating in the economy to the fullest is because they're afraid, quite frankly, of either catching COVID or spreading COVID. And so we need to do what we can to increase public confidence in public health. And I think if we work together, we really can do that. And but we all have to decide that it's our individual responsibility to act.
Mm-hmm. Let me take you back to August in Waukesha, the riots that we had. lots of tension. What could Congress do to alleviate some of that? Or can they? Is it out of their hands?
Well, I've been an advocate for the Justice and Policing Bill. I do think that there's things we can do to restore trust and full faith and credit in our system. You know, I'm from Oshkosh, which is in Winnebago County, and it was not too long ago that our Republican district attorney was sent to state and federal prison for corruption and bribe charges, Joe Paulus, the district attorney there. And when that happened in Winnebago County, it really shook the faith and trust in the system. You know, when you have a public figure like that you know, is unethical, is corrupt,
trust.
yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's that's part of it, is we have to look for ways to restore that. And what I would always tell, people watching this at home is to remember that there are actually things we can do locally, and that is participate in our local police and fire commissions. You know, each municipality, when I was in the Common Council in Oshkosh, we had a police and fire commission, and I think it's really important to talk about, are there ways to build community trust in policing, whether that's through neighborhood policing or community policing, so that way people aren't just experiencing law enforcement when there's an emergency, that they have these other trust opportunities built, and that's so important. The other thing I think we can do is fund, the Federal Department of Justice has special prosecutors, and I truly believe that these independent special prosecutors should be investigating every officer-involved death, no matter who it is. Because we want that impartiality, and in some ways you can only get objective, impartial investigation by a prosecutor who's objective and out of the area. I think it's really important, and I think it works. And Wisconsin has a special prosecutor statute, and I think that not every state in the country does, but I think it's something that our Federal Department of Justice really should do, and I think that would help restore trust and loyalty in the process when you know someone's coming in from the outside and can be objective.
If you are elected to Congress, how will you approach your fellow Democrats in Congress? Are you going to take the approach of, I'm brand new, I'm going to step back and watch how things work? Or do you go to Nancy Pelosi, your speaker, and say, here's what I think?
Well, I'll tell you, I have a lot of experience that I bring to the table because I'm not a career politician. I've been on the front lines of previous recessions as a bankruptcy attorney and a bankruptcy trustee, and I've also served in the local Common Council, local municipal government service, and I think that's important. When we're talking about how do we want to recover from this recession, what did we really learn from 2008, and what is the most effective tools that we have? I'll tell you right now, we should be doing loan modifications for small businesses, for farmers, and for families, and we should be looking at mortgage modifications too. And those are things that, we need programs, we need policies driven like that, so that way the recession doesn't get deeper. And I think that me having that experience as a bankruptcy trustee and overcoming a recession is really important. The other thing I bring to the table is I'm currently the vice president of a nationwide healthcare advocacy company that represents hospitals and patients against health insurance companies and against government payers such as Medicare or the Veterans Administration. And so I know an awful lot about how people find themselves at a loss when they think they have health insurance coverage, but then they get these denials in the mail. And I think these are some things that would really help us in discussing health care reform, because there's no doubt about it, the Supreme Court is going to be taking up the Affordable Care Act in November. And if they decide that the Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional, we have to send our best and brightest advocates to craft the new healthcare system of the future. And I think my experience, the last 8 years I've spent as a healthcare advocate, really adds power to the table of that practical private sector knowledge that is really missing when we talk about healthcare reform.
To say we have a political divide in Washington is quite the understatement, I would think. Despite the outcome of Tuesday's election, do you ever see two sides not necessarily becoming friends, but at least working together in a civil way? I think we have good examples out there, and I lead by example. When I was in the Wisconsin state legislature, I always made a point to find an issue that I could work with my Republican colleagues on, because what you end up finding is that most issues are not two-sided.
they're usually like six-sided. You know, there's tons of stakeholders who all want their little piece, you know, and you have to build a coalition. And so even with Representative Grothman, when we served in the state Senate together, we worked on issues about predatory paid rent-to-own industry. So we could agree on that. You know, when I was in the legislature with Dale Schultz, we agreed on funding for higher education. When I was working with Senator Mary Lozick, we talked about how can we improve the child foster care system. So I know it's possible. And you know what? Right now, I'll tell you something. I can give credit to Senator Ron Johnson. I really agree with some of his immigration reform proposals that he had put forward a few years ago, looking to support Wisconsin businesses in expanding something called the Heartland Visa, so that way we could actually expand immigration for niche skills, whether it's in agriculture or manufacturing or healthcare. The idea that these visas would be located in Wisconsin, you know, to have the geography here where it would allow Wisconsin businesses to compete with California and Florida and Texas and actually acquire this labor. And so I'm not afraid to tell a Republican that they have a good idea, is what I'm trying to say. And I think we have to lead by example. So again, you know, even I can find something to agree with Senator Johnson about, and then even President Trump. President Trump's administrations actually supported the idea of negotiating prices for physician-administered medication. So that could be IV infusions. And so I'm somebody who agrees with price negotiation for about 250 pharmaceuticals, but I'm not afraid to say that, and I think we need more people like that in Congress that can find the good ideas and work with others across the aisle.
We are with congressional candidate Jessica King, and we have much more, so stay with us.